Let's bring in Matt Gorman, Targeted Victory Executive Vice President, and Marie Harf, Fox News contributor and former State Department spokesperson under President Obama. So here's what the Nikki Haley op-ed said in part, quote, "If you like his policies but are put off by his tone or excesses, consider the cost of the past 4 years. I don't agree with Mr. Trump 100% of the time, but I do agree with him most of the time, and I disagree with Ms. Harris nearly all the time. That makes this an easy call." Marie, it's a very Reagan-like statement when he famously said, if you agree with somebody 80% of the time, they're your ally, not your 20% traitor. Will that potentially move the needle among women who haven't voted yet, who are waiting until tomorrow, trying to make the decision between voting for Trump or voting for Harris?
Well, John, it's interesting. The Trump campaign knows they have a serious problem because women have been fleeing from Donald Trump to Kamala Harris, including independent women, including many Republican women. All these latest polls, especially in the blue wall states, Michigan, Wisconsin, even that outlier Iowa poll, showed that especially older white women were really overwhelmingly now going towards Harris because, and look, that's a group that delivered the presidency in large part to Donald Trump in 2016, because of the repeal of Roe versus Wade, his language on the campaign trail. Look, you can write all the op-eds you want if you're Nikki Haley, but Donald Trump has not asked her to campaign for him, hasn't had her join him at rallies. He has done nothing to bring women back into the fold. And when his closing message is, I will protect you if you want me to or not, the Trump campaign has a serious problem, and my prediction is that women are going to put Kamala Harris over the top here because they are mad, and we're seeing it in every demographic and in every poll. All
right, but according to New York Times columnist Ross Douthat, who had a really interesting op-ed today, Matt, there is a crisis of confidence with Kamala Harris. He wrote, quote, "Notwithstanding the great rally around her after Biden's bow out, the Democratic nominee for president is still the Dan Quayle-like figure that almost everybody saw just a little while ago. Still vague on policy and painful in extended interviews, still carrying a record as a vice president that inspires little confidence in her abilities." So late deciders who are waiting until tomorrow to cast their ballot, they look at Kamala Harris, and many people say, you see an empty vessel. You see somebody who hasn't articulated policies. What are they to hang their hat on when they pull the lever?
Well, you're right. And as you teased before, Axios wrote a long piece calling her the no-comment candidate. You're right. On a list of issues which she hasn't really weighed in on. She took one side in 2019, and now she refuses to say where she stands right now. But look, this is going to be, in many ways, a gender gap election. Elise Stefanik, as you said before, was exactly right on this. The NBC News poll that came out yesterday shows Trump doing better with men than Harris is doing with women, and whatever side gets more of those supporters to their side is going to win this election. If we need to outperform with men, then we lose women by. This election is going to be won by us.
All right, Marie, here is a potential point of concern for Democrats. Even Jim Messina said that this is a little scary. Early voting in Pennsylvania, way down for Democrats, down a little bit for the GOP. In 2024, Democrat early vote return 971,615, Republican 571,725. Compare that to 2020. It was 1,702,000 for the Democrats, 623,404 for the Republicans. The Democrats this year, Marie, are down 42%. The Republicans are down 8%. Again, Jim Messina called it scary. What do you call it?
Well, look, I think this whole election season has been scary in many ways, but my friends I've talked, and it's almost over, thank goodness, but my friends I've talked to working on the campaign who are looking at these numbers every day, you know, tell me, you can't compare things to 2020, especially with early vote. It was such a different election, and there is a question about whether this Republican early vote surge that we're seeing is just cannibalizing from Election Day, because now the RNC has really been pushing Republicans to get out early and vote. Look, I feel very confident about our chances in Pennsylvania, in large part because we know that groups like women vote more than men, and we have seen that there's been all this concern about black men and how they were vote, and in the latest polls, they're really holding steady for Democrats. So I'm worried about these numbers. Everybody has to get out and vote tomorrow, but Democrats knocked on 2,000 doors a minute in Pennsylvania this weekend. That is a get-out-the-vote operation that Elon Musk cannot come close to matching.
Yeah. Now, in some states, there has been a GOP surge, but there in Pennsylvania, it's actually declined, Matt, in the number of Republicans who voted early. But here's the problem for Democrats. They're down in the early vote. They typically don't make that up on Election Day. Republicans typically rule the day on Election Day. So if you've got that decline in early voting for Democrats, plus the Republicans' inherent advantage or historic advantage on Election Day, what does that say about Pennsylvania?
Yeah, Republicans I talked to are pretty heartened with what they're seeing in Pennsylvania right now. And you mentioned it a couple minutes ago as well, talking with Sandra. One of the first things I'd be looking for is Philly turnout, along with Wayne County turnout out in Michigan. Those are going to be telling me what is the African-American turnout at with these levels. You know, at a certain level, it could be good for Harris. But right now, if you look at where things are in Georgia, North Carolina, African-American turnout's way down. If that continues, that trend in Pennsylvania and Michigan, that could be a very good sign as we go into the night for President Trump. So that is one of those things I'll be watching for very, very closely.
All right. So, again, all we can do is sit back and wait and see what happens. Marie, I think you're one of those Democrats who is nauseously optimistic.
That's right.
that she'll pull it out in the end. We'll find out one of these days.
Exactly.
And the new number from Nate Silver is up by 0.3%. You know, a whiff of air, a misplaced remark, a better than expected ground game can change those numbers. John Roberts, your predecessor here the previous hour, said what an exciting day it is. Let me tell you, I've been through 2 presidential campaigns. On the last day, this is the worst day of your life. They're drinking Maalox. They're nervous. They're not sleeping. The candidate is on the edge. They're on the edge. This is the worst time. And John, as a journalist, thinks it's a great time. Let me tell you, inside the campaign,
Christmas Eve and he's waiting for Santa Claus. And Carl is, thinking that it's more like Halloween in terms of terrifying moments for them. This is Van Jones, a CNN political commentator, just a short time ago this morning. Actually, watch this.
I'm worried. Philadelphia is where we've got to run up a big margin. But Philly overall has been trending down, not in terms of going toward the Republicans, just people not getting out to vote. The other thing that has me worried is that the Jewish vote in the suburban areas, Biden won the Jewish vote by 70%, 70-30 last time. Some polls show Kamala at 50-50. That is 70,000 votes.
So, Juan, let me go to you on that. When you look at Pennsylvania, Philadelphia County is probably the most important place for Democrats. And Brian Yanis yesterday reported that Kamala Harris would need to drive it up by about 600,000 votes in order to nail down that part of Pennsylvania. Do you have the same concerns as Van Jones when you look at the early voting numbers and who's turning out?
No, it's a little different. I mean, he breaks it down in terms of the Jewish vote, for example. I don't see it breaking 50. I don't see that at all. But I think what it is who's getting out to vote. And it's a matter of making sure that people actually are making the effort to get in those long lines that we've seen on screen. And so right there, the point is drive up the numbers. Get your folks to the polls. And I think what we've seen today in terms of final pitches coming from the candidates is Harris has been very smooth in saying, you know, let's be forward-looking. Let's come together. Let's be inclusive. She's not even mentioning Trump by name. On the other hand, I think you've seen, as we showed moments ago, Trump is pretty angry still about, the Iowa poll. He's upset about, what's going on in terms of potential Democrats' misbehavior and stolen elections. He's raging about microphones. So to me, I think, he's going to make an effort, I think, to get like a popular female podcast host out tonight to campaign with him. Why? Because he's concerned about those people in the suburbs, those women in the suburbs that Van Jones is talking about.
Well, we've done a lot of polling in the 7 swing states, and we're getting very tight numbers, as I think most are. And rest assured, we're reporting the numbers as accurately as we can. I think what may exist, Martha, which hasn't been discussed much, is that in 2016 and 2020, there was an undercount in the swing states of the Trump vote. And I still believe the discouraged voters, the undecided, the shy Trump voters do exist. And all of those groups are going to break for Trump. So that could be worth a point or two more for the former president. Not guaranteed, but I think that gives him a somewhat greater chance of winning than perhaps the odds makers are now suggesting.
So very interesting. You know, Lee Carter, what we've been told is that the many pollsters have beaten that out of their system, that they have waited for that, and that over the course of this is now the third election, really unprecedented, of watching one candidate, and that they have really accounted for that voter who doesn't necessarily want to speak to the pollster and is a Trump supporter. Do you agree or disagree?
I think it's almost impossible to account for it, because I don't think it's just about how you ask the question. It's our society today. About 28% of Americans say that they have lied to a family member about who they are going to vote for. That's about a quarter of Americans are lying to a family member. Why would you, if you're going to lie to a family member, why would you not lie to a pollster? Why would you not be in that same situation? We are so very polarized that we've decided if you disagree with us, that the other side is evil. And that puts us in a really, really bad position. I think pollsters have gotten better at it, but when you still look at some of the data that's coming out, they're suggesting that, you know, Democrats are between 16 and 20% more likely to answer polls than Republicans. I think there's a reason for that. And I don't think that it's people are lying. I think that they're just not willing to tell, you know, anybody what it is that they're going to do. And I think we still have shy Trump voters. I think we have a lot of people who are carrying that around. I think Kamala has a theory that there are shy Harris voters as well, which I think is interesting. Are they sort of like shy like Liz Cheney's? I'm not sure that that exists, but that is something that I think they're counting on. We've seen some of their advertisements about, you know, abortion and sort of your vote is your vote, it's private. With Julia Roberts, that advertisement is based on that insight, but I'm just not sure that that really exists.
Okay.
Yeah, the Democrats, our union did endorse Harris for president, but the rank and file workers, 75% of the workers support President Trump. And that's a lot of the unions around, blue collar worker unions, even the Teamsters, that they usually endorse Democrats, they didn't endorse the candidate. But their rank and files mostly for President Trump.
Yeah. So you pay dues to the union, the leadership does their own thing, and then the rank and file workers are 75%, you say, of a very different mindset. So how does that play out? You know, do the workers do their own effort to try to get out the vote and try to outbalance what the leadership has done?
It's kind of hard because the International and the union, they want us to vote Democrat. They push for it. Yeah. That's why I try to get the message out there. I started the Steelworkers for Trump on social media, and it took off. And I got 2K members in less than 2 months since I started it. So I'm trying to get the word out. But like I said, a lot of them are tired of the Democrats because they promised stuff like the tariffs. No Democrat president ever put tariffs on steel to help the steelworkers out. When President Trump was elected in 2016, he put tariffs on, and that kind of saved the steel industry.
So tell me about, you know, that clearly is one of the main reasons, right? It's policy and the impact on your jobs. What are you seeing as you spend time in your town and at work? Pennsylvania, by all accounts, is completely tied. At least that's what the pollsters tell us. What do you think is the reality?
I think if all the blue-collar workers get out and the unions get out, and then President Trump will be elected president, because I think majority of them will vote for President Trump.
Well, I don't think you can compare the campaigns because Trump's campaign was much longer. Longest in the history.
Ending.
The longest in history. Kamala was lucky. She only had to do it for 60 days and barely showed up. I learned a lot in this segment. I didn't know any of that stuff, and I was like, I got nothing to add. Although I will add this. The real closing argument to me is one of extortion. It's got that feeling that if Trump wins, we will scream and cry and burn and riot, just like we did in 2016 for 3 years. And I do think that has an effect on people. It has an effect like, geez, I really don't care that much about who wins. I just want to be left alone, and I don't want people yelling. I don't want protests. So you know what? I think that's the strongest argument for Kamala Harris is that there's an ambivalent portion of society that just doesn't want to be harassed by liberals. And so the liberals are going to be screaming and saying it's on you if she loses. So it's like, fine, whatever. I'll vote the crazy lady in.
Boy, is that scary. Well, I still want to be President Trump because nothing's fundamentally changed. I think this race was probably decided 2 weeks ago when people really looked at the numbers and the economy and the positions. And right now we're down to just a few voters, I think, who may or may not change their mind on Election Day.
You know, we look at that early vote. Some of the campaigns point to how it breaks down, Republicans, Democrats, Independents. Some states do that. The independent bucket, Alex, we just don't know how that breaks. There's some data in some of those states that you think is indicative.
Important, yeah. I was, I see a surge in Republican registration, and early voting's going well for Republicans and mail-in voting, but those independents are as big a group or larger than Republicans or Democrats. So I asked some friends who did some polling last week in 4 swing states.
Reliable pollsters.
Reliable, on message, reliable, been around for years. And they went into Arizona, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin and looked at independents, the swing voters. Trump is leading Harris in those 4 states 47-42. And in Pennsylvania,
with independents specifically.
With only independents. So what does that mean in those 4 states? Well, when you add the increase in Republican registration, when you look at the early voting advantage, and when you look at the urban areas like Philadelphia, where Democrats are underperforming with the black vote, you begin to see a pattern that there's kind of a big lump under the rug here, I think, for Trump, that maybe the surveys have not been picking up.
Mark, where is this quiet confidence coming from Democrats? Is it spin? I mean, here is John Ralston, who covers Nevada. He looks at the numbers all the time. Here's what he said on MSNBC.
Most people that I trust on both sides believe that this is going to be closer than Catherine Cortez Masto's victory for the U.S. Senate in 2022, which was 8,000 votes. And remember, she wasn't even ahead on election night. The mail ballots that came in late put her over the top. And I think that's what's going to happen again for Kamala Harris here.
He's specifically talking about Nevada, and Republicans talk about Nevada like it's manna from heaven, like it's looking good.
Well, I think Nevada, everyone thinks is really close either way. As in your model, it's the one state she may take out of these states, clearly. However, I do think Democrats are feeling more confident. They just feel that Kamala's in her groove, that she's out there. They've switched to a positive message. She looked really desperate when she was on the all-negative Hitler message. And the Democrats I talked to think it can't be Trump. Trump is going to top out at 47%. This is what the Democrats think today.
But is it because of the get out the vote effort? Is it because they like the clothes better? I mean, if you're looking at the numbers that Alex is looking at and you're looking at, where's the confidence?
Well, they look at minorities coming back. They think there's a Univision poll that shows Latinos coming back to the Democratic Party. They look at young people voting strongly, and they look at a sense of momentum, that the Trump momentum is over, that he's making these comments that are easily picked out and show division. All of those things give Democrats some real confidence when you talk to them. May not be true, but that's what they're feeling.
I think what we're seeing is a different story. Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and the stages of grief when you lose something important in your life. First, it's denial, then it's resignation and despair, and rationalization is a big part of it. I think what we're seeing is Democrats are almost desperately looking for the sunny side of this story. But when you look at the numbers, I just don't see that it's there right now.
What's the first thing you're looking at tomorrow? We'll get some early stuff. We'll obviously have our Fox News voter analysis 5:30-ish. We'll get a sense, but the first states come in about 7 o'clock.
No, I look at the first states. I look at New Hampshire. Is it closer or wider than you expect? I think that's a good bellwether. I expect her to win it. But if suddenly it's 2 points instead of 5 or 6, well, that means Trump's having a good night. I look for the gender gap. I think that's going to be super important and probably determines the race. He has to win more male votes then she's going to win female votes because there are more female voters. I think that's absolutely going to be the first things I'm going to look at. And then I look at what I call the soccer grannies. Older women who were soccer moms, who were brought up in the era when abortion was illegal, who, if you believe something from Ann Seltzer's poll, may be breaking late for Harris.
Soccer grannies. I didn't know we evolved to soccer grannies. What happened to the moms?
Live longer, healthier now. I think we're going to see Michigan and perhaps North Carolina report early, the way they're set
and
up.
Georgia.
And Georgia. And so we're going to get the beginning of Trump's sweep through the working class South up through the Rust Belt. We're going to see the bookends, beginning and end, early. And I think that's going to give us a good idea of what's really going on.
To some extent optimistic, although it will no doubt be reported in the press as dark, because everything he says is reported that way. I would say this about this as I look at this tonight, Brett, and that is, for the past 3 cycles, going on a 4th now, the critical factor in our national elections, midterms and presidential elections alike, has been the resistance, the aversion to Donald Trump. It saved the Democrats in each of those three years, 2018 midterms, 2020, and 2022, where a big landslide was expected for the Republicans who did not materialize. And it was a lot about Trump and a lot about candidates associated with Trump who could not win. If people have gotten over that and now regard him, as a lot of the surveys we've seen indicate, in a much more favorable light than then, that could and would likely be the decisive factor in this election.
all they want, all Americans want, is normalcy. That's all they want. And in fact, in 2020, that's what they thought they were getting when they elected Joe Biden, which is why he started in office with an approval rating in the high 50s, and then he immediately sank because it turns out both he was not normal and his administration was not normal. What they were providing was not normalcy. This is why what they're talking about right now, the American people, in electing Donald Trump, is a return to normalcy, meaning a solid economy, no foreign wars, anti-wokeness, a regulatory state that actually makes sense, lower taxes. All people want is not to think about this stuff anymore. So if Democrats make the mistake of running up against Donald Trump's normalcy agenda, and make no mistake, what Donald Trump is running as right now is a normal, moderate candidate. Now, that doesn't mean that he doesn't say things. Everybody knows that he says things. He's Trump. But that's not the same thing as his agenda. His agenda is what Americans are looking for by every available poll, by the way. And so if they stand in the way of that agenda, they're going to pay the price at the ballot box next time, too.
He's running as the rich, stern grandfather, and a lot of people respect that. When you see the narcissism of people taking out insurance policies, Democrats, because they might have to lawyer up because Trump's going to throw them in Gitmo, or I don't know, the lengths they're going to insult people, their own voters, Ben, psychologically, what does that tell you?
I mean, it tells me they think that they're losing. Kamala Harris's team has put out a couple of ads in the course of the last 72 hours. One was to women and one was to men. For women, it was, you need to hide from your husbands exactly how you're voting. You need to secretly vote for Kamala Harris. And then, in case you missed it, they said to men, you need to hide from the other men that you're voting for Kamala Harris. What does it say about a campaign when they're saying to their prospective voters, guys, we know you have to keep it a secret. We know everyone wants you to vote Trump, but secretly you're allowed to vote for Kamala. Here's the thing. I've heard a lot of people in this election make a case for Trump, right? I'm one of them. I've heard many people make a case against Trump. I've yet to hear anyone make a case for Kamala Harris. Anyone. No one can make a case for this woman. She has not made a case for herself. Tim Walz has not made a case for her. Joe Biden will not make a case for her. There is no case for Kamala Harris. There's just pro-Trump and anti-Trump. And I really wonder whether anti-Trump gets you all the way across the finish line with a candidate on the other side like Kamala Harris.
Well, if she can't make a case for herself, why should other people? And she doesn't even talk about the last 4 years. She doesn't talk about the next 4 years, the last 4 years. She just talks about Donald Trump. Do you get a sense sometimes, and we talked about this right after the coup, that this was just to stop the bleeding down ballot? This was maybe to save the House, maybe stop the bleeding in the Senate, and just prevent a wipeout? Because after that debate, we were looking at a wipeout down ballot with Biden as the nominee. Do you still see it this way? Because she's knocking on doors at 8:30 at night in Pennsylvania.
I mean, I think that everything that she's doing right now is a desperation move. I mean, she herself was a desperation move. It's why she's spending time in places with competitive Senate races that may not be competitive for her on the presidential level. She's really allocating resources oddly for a candidate who theoretically, according to her, is up. I mean, her campaign is claiming right now that she is not only going to win tomorrow night, she's going to sweep tomorrow night. That is not the way her campaign is behaving.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.